Picture this. You're scrolling through TikTok at 2 a.m. and suddenly you see a 36-year-old woman sitting at her makeup desk, giggling like a schoolgirl while talking to someone on speakerphone. But here's the twist. The voice on the other end is coming from inside a maximum security prison, and the man she's cooing over just happens to be serving time for triple homicide. Meet Ashley Trevino, the woman who turned dating convicted killers into a full-time career, raking in over $100,000 in a single live stream while her 2 teenage daughters sleep on a shared air mattress in the next room. This isn't just another story about questionable parenting choices. This is about a woman who systematically destroys everything she touches, including the innocence of her own children, all while broadcasting it live to thousands of viewers who can't look away from the train wreck. And by the end of this series, you'll understand why an entire internet community banded together to try and save 2 girls from their own mother. Ashley Trevino doesn't just date inmates. She collects them like trading cards. 26 different convicted felons in the last 5 years, to be exact. But she's not just any prison pen pal. She's built an empire around her twisted relationships, making more money in a single TikTok live stream than most people make in a year. The numbers are staggering. Ashley claims her highest earning stream brought in $112,000 in just 2.5 hours. That's more than $44,000 per hour for sitting in front of a camera talking to murderers while her teenage daughters listen from the next room. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Ashley doesn't keep her prison boyfriends a secret from her children. She parades them in front of her 13 and 16-year-old daughters like their potential stepdads, forcing the girls to call these convicted killers daddy. Let that sink in for a moment. A woman is making her teenage daughters call a man who murdered 3 people daddy, while she counts the donation money rolling in from viewers who are either horrified or entertained by the spectacle. The Ashley Trevino phenomenon didn't happen overnight. It started with what seemed like a normal relationship gone wrong, but it quickly spiraled into something much darker. Her first documented prison relationship was with Isaiah Gonzalez, a man serving 45 years for aggravated robbery, arson, and murder. When Isaiah was just 15 years old, he participated in a meticulously planned robbery that ended with a gas station manager named Muhammad being shot and killed. Muhammad had a wife and 7 children waiting for him at home that night, but Ashley didn't see a cold-blooded killer when she looked at Isaiah's prison profile. She saw opportunity. Within months of their first letter exchange, Ashley was driving 3 hours every weekend to visit Isaiah in prison. She documented every moment on Instagram, posting photos of her daughters visiting their new daddy behind bars. The captions read like a twisted fairy tale. "We had a great visit today, and so blessed that both of our girls were able to go see daddy." The psychological manipulation was already beginning. Ashley was teaching her daughters that this was normal, that having a father figure who could only be visited through bulletproof glass was just another type of family dynamic. But Isaiah was just the beginning. When that relationship ended after Ashley was caught talking to other inmates during a brief breakup, she moved on to Noe Trevino, arrested for stabbing a man outside a nightclub. They married in 2022, and Ashley took his last name, the name she still uses today, even though Noe initiated divorce proceedings from behind prison walls. The pattern was established. Find an inmate, marry him, exploit the relationship for content and money, then move on to the next one when the novelty wore off, or the relationship became inconvenient. What makes Ashley's story particularly chilling is how she weaponizes her own children for content. Her daughters aren't just witnesses to their mother's dysfunction, they're unwilling participants in a live-streamed nightmare. During one particularly disturbing live stream, Ashley's younger daughter comes into the room complaining that she's sick and has thrown up. Instead of comforting her child or taking her to get medical attention, Ashley's first instinct is to accuse her of lying. You just threw up? Why are you lying to me? Ashley snaps at her daughter while the camera continues rolling. When the girl insists she's telling the truth, Ashley keeps dancing to her theme song, completely ignoring her sick child. This isn't an isolated incident. Ashley has monetized every aspect of her daughter's lives, from their medical emergencies to their emotional breakdowns. When one daughter needed to go to the hospital, Ashley told her live stream audience, "If y'all want me to tell you about my baby girl's health, go ahead and send the galaxies." Galaxies are 15 donations on TikTok. Ashley was literally selling her daughter's medical information to the highest bidder. The living conditions Ashley provides for her daughters while she spends thousands on designer bags and first-class flights are nothing short of neglectful. The girls, ages 13 and 16, share a single air mattress on the floor of their bedroom. Not bunk beds, not even separate mattresses. One air mattress for 2 teenage girls. When confronted about this during a podcast interview, Ashley's response was telling. "Now that I know they fixed up their room, I'm going to buy them a bed for Christmas. But I don't know if I should get them bunk beds because they're older, or if I should get them one bed to share." This is a woman who spends $700 on a single grocery trip, buying nothing but hot Cheetos and candy, who drops $3,000 on Balenciaga slippers, who flies first class to Disneyland by herself while her children sleep on the floor. The misallocation of resources isn't accidental. It's a deliberate choice that prioritizes Ashley's image and comfort over her children's basic needs. But the financial neglect pales in comparison to the emotional and psychological damage Ashley inflicts on her daughters through her prison relationships. Consider Francisco, one of Ashley's most notorious prison boyfriends. Francisco is serving time for the murder of 2 teenage girls, 13-year-old Elizabeth Flores and 19-year-old Ivana Cortez. Elizabeth was the same age as Ashley's younger daughter when Francisco gunned her down in cold blood. The details of Francisco's crimes are particularly heinous. Elizabeth, just 13 years old, was shot in the back of the head and thigh for the crime of crossing out rival gang graffiti. Ivana was shot 4 times in the stomach, leg, and ear, simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Francisco's DNA was found on 19 shell casings at the crime scene. Police found weapons, ammunition, and gang paraphernalia in his apartment. He even made a video at the victim's memorial, bragging about the murders to fellow gang members. This is the man Ashley chose to have live conversations with while her daughters listened from the next room. This is the man she defended as innocent, while laughing about the deaths of 2 young girls. During one live stream, viewers confronted Ashley about Francisco's crimes, pointing out that he had killed a 13-year-old girl. Ashley's response was to laugh and say, "Honestly, R.I.P. to those who lost their lives," before dissolving into giggles. When pressed about why she found the murder of children funny, Ashley's explanation was even more disturbing. "It's funny because y'all are making it seem like some man is guilty when he has nothing to do with that. Y'all don't even know the whole freaking story." The whole freaking story includes Francisco's conviction for multiple murders, his extensive criminal history, and his complete lack of remorse for his actions. But in Ashley's twisted worldview, defending a child killer was more important than protecting her own children from exposure to his influence. The psychological impact on Ashley's daughters is evident in every interaction captured on her live streams. The girls have learned to navigate around their mother's volatility, often serving as her moderators and trying to prevent her from saying or doing things that will make their situation worse. During one stream, Ashley's daughter can be heard saying, "Mom, don't do this. Mom, don't say this." These children have been forced into the role of parenting their own mother, trying to protect her from herself while simultaneously being exploited for her content. The daughters have also learned that their mother's attention and affection are conditional on their compliance with her twisted lifestyle. When Ashley's relationship with Santos, a 19-year-old she met through her daughter's crush, began to sour. She blamed her children for not being supportive enough of her choices. "My kids don't even have my back," Ashley complained during one live stream, as if expecting her teenage daughters to enthusiastically support their mother's relationship with someone barely older than they are. The normalization of dysfunction in the Trevino household extends beyond just the prison relationships. Ashley has created an environment where chaos, violence, and exploitation are treated as entertainment, and her daughters have no choice but to adapt or suffer the consequences. This adaptation comes at a tremendous cost. Both girls have expressed that they preferred their lives before their mother became TikTok famous, when they had some semblance of privacy and normalcy. They've been forced to become homeschooled because other students recognized their mother and made their school experience unbearable. "I feel like I would rather go back to my old life," Ashley's daughter said during a podcast interview. "Like, we have money, but I don't like being online publicly. That's when I was more confident. I didn't care how I looked, and now, since I'm public, I care more about how I look and how I go out and stuff." These are the words of a child who has been robbed of her childhood, forced into a public spotlight she never asked for, and made to participate in her mother's exploitation of their family's dysfunction. But Ashley's response to her daughter's pain reveals the depth of her narcissism and lack of empathy. Instead of recognizing the harm she's causing, Ashley doubles down, insisting that her children are ungrateful for the opportunities she's provided them. The most disturbing aspect of Ashley's story isn't just what she does. It's how she's managed to build an audience that enables and financially supports her behavior. Every donation, every view, every engagement with her content sends the message that exploiting children and glorifying violence is acceptable as long as it's entertaining. The viewers who send Ashley thousands of dollars aren't just passive observers. They're active participants in the abuse of two teenage girls. They're funding a lifestyle that prioritizes a mother's narcissistic needs over her children's safety and well-being. And Ashley knows exactly what she's doing. She's weaponized her children's trauma, turned their dysfunction into content, and built a financial empire on the foundation of their suffering. This is just the beginning of Ashley Trevino's story. What you've seen so far is merely the surface of a much deeper and more disturbing pattern of behavior that spans years and involves multiple victims, both inside and outside her family. In the coming parts of this series, we'll explore the full extent of Ashley's manipulation, the other lives she's destroyed in her quest for attention and money, and the growing movement of people trying to save her daughters from a mother who sees them as nothing more than props in her twisted performance. Because this isn't just about one woman's bad choices, it's about a system that allows children to be exploited for entertainment, and the people who are fighting to change it. Ashley Trevino doesn't just date one murderer at a time. She runs what can only be described as a prison boyfriend assembly line. 26 different convicted felons in 5 years means she's cycling through a new killer every 2.5 months, treating human lives like a subscription service where the content is violence and the payment is commissary money. But here's what makes Ashley's operation truly sinister. Each relationship follows the exact same playbook, and her daughters are forced to watch the same traumatic pattern repeat over and over again, like being trapped in a horror movie that never ends. The pattern is as predictable as it is disturbing. Ashley finds an inmate through Write-A-Prisoner websites or gets passed along through prison networks. Because yes, inmates literally recommend her to each other like she's a service they're reviewing. She love bombs them with letters, photos, and money. She brings her daughters to meet their new daddy in prison visiting rooms. She exploits the relationship for content and cash. Then, when the novelty wears off or something more interesting comes along, she discards them and moves on to the next one. What's particularly chilling is how Ashley has perfected this system. She's not stumbling into these relationships accidentally. She's running a calculated operation that treats convicted killers like interchangeable parts in her content machine. Let's examine the full roster of Ashley's prison boyfriends, because understanding the scope of violence she's exposed her children to is crucial to grasping the depth of her depravity. After Francisco, the child killer who murdered 2 teenage girls, Ashley moved on to Eli. Eli's crimes read like a domestic violence horror story. He was convicted of strangling a woman and breaking his own 2-year-old daughter's femur. The femur is the strongest bone in the human body, requiring tremendous force to break. Eli slammed a truck door on his toddler's leg with such violence that he shattered the bone that's designed to support 30 times a person's body weight. Eli's excuse? His family has a bone condition that makes their bones more easy to break. This is the same man who sent Ashley text messages threatening domestic violence if she didn't respond quickly enough to his messages. But Ashley didn't see a child abuser when she looked at Eli. She saw content. She saw someone who could help her maintain her image as the ultimate ride or die prison girlfriend. Even after learning about his history of violence against children, Ashley maintained a cordial relationship with Eli, continuing to flirt with him on live streams. Think about what this means for Ashley's daughters. Their mother is actively choosing to associate with a man who broke a 2-year-old's leg, while simultaneously expecting them to call these men daddy and accept them as father figures. Then there's the unnamed inmate whose story reveals the true extent of Ashley's callousness. During one live stream, Ashley was getting her makeup done when she received news that this boyfriend had been involved in a prison fight and was likely hospitalized. Instead of showing genuine concern for another human being, Ashley turned it into content. She started sobbing on camera while her friends fanned her face and told her, "Don't cry, you're a bad bitch." The entire scene was performed for her audience, turning someone else's potential serious injury into a moment for Ashley to receive sympathy and donations. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of Ashley's prison boyfriend collection is how she talks about them when the relationships end. She doesn't express regret about the violence they've committed or concern for their victims. Instead, she complains about being used for commissary money or not getting enough attention. When Jesse, another ex-convict boyfriend, was released from prison, Ashley documented their reunion like it was a romantic movie. She rented a hotel room, covered the bed with rose petals, and prepared a snack basket for his release. But Jesse's behavior revealed the reality of these relationships. He showed no interest in Ashley, kept his distance, and seemed more interested in freedom than in continuing their prison romance. Ashley's response to Jesse's disinterest wasn't self-reflection about why she was attracted to men who used her. Instead, she became vindictive, eventually accusing him of assault when their relationship soured, only to later recant and continue interacting with him on social media. This pattern of accusation and reconciliation reveals something crucial about Ashley's psychology. She doesn't actually care about the violence these men have committed. She only cares about how that violence can be used to serve her narrative and generate content. The commissary money aspect of Ashley's relationships deserves special attention because it reveals the transactional nature of everything she does. Inmates have confirmed that Ashley is well known in certain prison systems as someone who will put money on books and provide financial support in exchange for attention and the appearance of a relationship. One particularly disturbing detail: Ashley is currently receiving commissary money from a 55-year-old man in Florida who was previously arrested for exposing himself to minors. This isn't a romantic relationship. This is a financial arrangement where Ashley is being paid by someone with a history of crimes against children. The fact that Ashley accepts money from someone who has victimized children while simultaneously exposing her own daughters to convicted killers reveals the complete absence of any protective instinct toward her children. But the commissary money flows both ways. Ashley has spent thousands of dollars supporting her various prison boyfriends, money that could have been used to buy her daughters proper beds, nutritious food, or basic necessities. Instead, that money goes to men who have taken lives, destroyed families, and shown no remorse for their actions. During one live stream, Ashley bragged about being with 30 inmates and described herself as being in a prison sister-wife relationship because one of her current boyfriends was already married. The casual way she discusses these relationships, as if they're normal dating experiences rather than connections to violent criminals, demonstrates how completely detached she is from reality. Ashley's daughters are forced to witness not just their mother's relationships with these men, but also her complete lack of judgment about the danger they represent. During phone calls that Ashley live streams, her daughters can be heard in the background, sometimes even participating in conversations with convicted killers. The psychological impact of this exposure cannot be overstated. These girls are learning that violence is acceptable, that men who hurt women and children can be romantic partners, and that their mother's attention and affection are always secondary to whatever inmate she's currently obsessing over. One of the most disturbing examples of this prioritization occurred when Ashley's daughter was sick and needed medical attention. Instead of taking her child to urgent care, Ashley was more concerned about a phone call from one of her prison boyfriends. When her friend suggested she take her daughter to the hospital, Ashley's response was telling, "I know, but I have to get up early tomorrow." Getting up early was more important than her daughter's health. A phone call from a convicted killer was more important than her child's medical needs. This isn't just neglect. It's a deliberate choice to prioritize violent criminals over her own children's well-being. The normalization of violence in the Trevino household extends beyond just the romantic relationships. Ashley has created an environment where discussing murder, assault, and other violent crimes is treated as casual conversation. Her daughters have been exposed to detailed discussions of their mother's boyfriend's crimes, often while those same men are on speakerphone participating in the conversation. During one particularly chilling moment, Ashley was on a call with Francisco, the child killer, when viewers started asking about his crimes. Instead of ending the call or protecting her daughters from hearing about the murder of children their own age, Ashley laughed and defended Francisco, while her daughters listened from the next room. The message this sends to Ashley's daughters is clear. Violence against children is acceptable, even amusing, as long as it serves their mother's entertainment purposes. But Ashley's collection of prison boyfriends isn't just about the individual relationships. It's about the systematic way she's built her entire identity around being an inmate hopper. She's turned dating killers into a brand, complete with merchandise, catchphrases, and a loyal following of people who celebrate her choices. During TikTok battles with other creators, Ashley proudly discusses her prison boyfriend count like it's an achievement. When asked why she prefers inmates, her answer reveals the depth of her dysfunction. "I prefer inmates because I feel like if you're going to get hurt, it's better to get hurt while they're incarcerated than out here in the free world." This statement encapsulates everything wrong with Ashley's worldview. She expects to be hurt by the men she dates. She's not looking for healthy relationships. She's looking for controlled abuse, where the violence is contained by prison walls, but the psychological manipulation can continue through letters and phone calls. The fact that she's having this conversation while her daughters are in the house, potentially listening, shows how completely she's normalized dysfunction and violence as acceptable relationship dynamics. Ashley's prison boyfriend collection also reveals her complete lack of empathy for the victims of these crimes. She's never once expressed genuine remorse or sympathy for the families destroyed by her boyfriend's actions. Instead, she treats their crimes like interesting backstories that add drama to her content. When discussing Francisco's murder of 2 teenage girls, Ashley's concern wasn't for the families who lost their children. Her concern was that people were making it seem like some man is guilty when she believed he was innocent. even when presented with overwhelming evidence of his guilt, Ashley chose to defend a child killer rather than acknowledge the pain of his victims' families. This pattern repeats with every relationship. Ashley never discusses the impact of these crimes on the victims or their families. She never expresses concern about the violence these men are capable of. Instead, she treats their criminal histories like plot points in her personal drama series. The psychological profile that emerges from examining Ashley's prison boyfriend collection is deeply disturbing. This is a woman who is sexually and emotionally attracted to violence, who seeks out men who have proven their capacity for extreme brutality, and who uses that violence as a form of entertainment for her audience. But perhaps most disturbing of all is how Ashley has managed to monetize this attraction to violence. Every donation she receives, every view her content generates, every dollar she makes from her prison relationships is essentially payment for glorifying and normalizing violence against women and children. Her audience isn't just watching a train wreck. They're financially supporting a woman who teaches her daughters that violence is acceptable, that killers make good father figures, and that a mother's romantic interests are more important than her children's safety and well-being. The scope of Ashley's prison boyfriend collection reveals this isn't a series of poor choices or a woman with bad luck in dating. This is a systematic pattern of seeking out the most violent men available and exposing her children to them for profit. And we're still only scratching the surface of Ashley Trevino's story. The prison boyfriends are just one aspect of a much larger pattern of exploitation, manipulation, and abuse that extends far beyond her romantic relationships. In the next part of this series, we'll explore how Ashley's quest for attention and money has led her to exploit not just convicted killers, but also vulnerable young men barely out of their teens, including one disturbing relationship that began when her own daughter expressed interest in the same person. Because Ashley Trevino doesn't just collect prison boyfriends, she collects victims. And her own daughters are at the top of that list. If you thought Ashley Trevino's collection of prison boyfriends was the depths of her depravity, you haven't seen anything yet. Because Ashley doesn't just prey on convicted killers behind bars, she also targets vulnerable young men barely out of their teens, and she's willing to destroy her own daughter's feelings to get what she wants. This is the story of Santos, a 19-year-old who became the center of one of Ashley's most disturbing relationships, and how a mother's narcissistic need for attention led her to commit what can only be described as emotional incest against her own child. The Santos saga begins with what should have been a normal, healthy moment between a teenage girl and her mother. Ashley's eldest daughter, who was 15 at the time, came to her mom excited about a small TikTok creator she'd discovered. Like any teenager with an internet crush, she showed her mom Santos's account and said something like, "Look at him. He's kind of cute. Isn't he, Mom?" This should have been a sweet bonding moment. A daughter sharing her innocent crush with her mother, maybe getting some gentle teasing or advice about young love. Instead, Ashley saw an opportunity. Within hours of her daughter showing her Santos's account, Ashley was sliding into his DMs. She began flirting with a teenager who was barely older than her own daughter, completely disregarding the fact that this was the boy her child had expressed interest in. But Ashley didn't just steal her daughter's crush. She did it publicly, on live streams, while her daughter watched. The psychological cruelty of this cannot be overstated. Ashley took what should have been a private, innocent moment of teenage attraction and turned it into public humiliation for her own child. She weaponized her daughter's vulnerability and trust, using it as a launching pad for her own predatory behavior. During live streams with Santos, Ashley would make sexually explicit comments while her daughters were in the house. She talked about wanting to breastfeed Santos, grabbing her chest and jiggling it for the camera. She told him he would need to put body oil all over my body. She discussed their sexual encounters in graphic detail, describing positions and frequency, while her teenage daughters could hear every word. The power dynamic here is crucial to understand. Santos was 19 years old, barely an adult, with no real-life experience or financial independence. Ashley was 36, with years of experience manipulating vulnerable people and a substantial income from her TikTok empire. This wasn't a relationship between equals. This was a predator targeting someone young enough to be her son. But Ashley's predatory behavior towards Santos becomes even more disturbing when you consider the lies and manipulation involved. Santos had told everyone he was 22 years old, which would have made him a legal adult with some life experience. The truth was that he was only 19, making him barely legal and significantly more vulnerable to Ashley's manipulation. When Santos's real age was discovered during a live stream, he broke down crying, feeling like his whole life was ruined. Instead of recognizing that she had been involved with someone who was essentially still a teenager, Ashley's response was to comfort him like a mother would comfort a child, which makes the sexual nature of their relationship even more disturbing. I got you, Ashley cooed while hugging the sobbing teenager. Don't cry, it's okay. This maternal behavior towards someone she was also having sex with reveals the deeply twisted psychology at work in Ashley's relationships. The age revelation also exposed another layer of Ashley's predatory behavior. Santos had been working as a club promoter and drinking alcohol during Ashley's live streams. At 19, he was below the legal drinking age, meaning Ashley was not only involved with a teenager, but was also facilitating underage drinking and potentially contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Ashley's response to learning Santos's real age was telling. Instead of ending the relationship or acknowledging the problematic nature of their dynamic, she claimed she didn't know he was 19 and continued the relationship anyway. This pattern of plausible deniability is classic predator behavior, creating just enough distance from responsibility while continuing the harmful behavior. The impact on Ashley's daughter throughout this ordeal was devastating to witness. During one live stream, Santos actually asked Ashley's daughter directly, "How do you feel that your mom stole your crush?" The daughter's response, "Santos, how do you feel about being bald?" was a defensive deflection from a teenager trying to protect herself from public humiliation. Ashley just sat there during this exchange, showing no protective instinct toward her daughter and no recognition of the emotional damage she was causing. In fact, she seemed to enjoy the attention and drama, treating her daughter's pain as entertainment for her audience. The psychological term for what Ashley did to her daughter is emotional incest, or covert incest. This occurs when a parent uses their child to meet their own emotional or psychological needs, often in ways that are inappropriate and damaging to the child's development. By stealing her daughter's crush and flaunting the relationship publicly, Ashley violated fundamental boundaries between parent and child. But Ashley's predatory behavior toward young men doesn't stop with Santos. During a trip with other TikTok creators, Ashley became fixated on another teenager, the 18-year-old brother of one of the other creators. Despite his sister repeatedly telling Ashley to stop and that he was too young for her, Ashley continued pursuing him. Video footage from this trip shows Ashley trying to kiss the 18-year-old on the side of his face while he looks visibly uncomfortable. She talked about wanting to wear a dress for easy access, implying she wanted this teenager to have sexual access to her. She cuddled with him during live streams while he sat facing the camera looking incredibly uncomfortable. The pattern is clear. Ashley specifically targets young men who are barely legal, often still teenagers, and uses her financial resources and social media platform to manipulate them into relationships they're not equipped to handle. What makes this even more disturbing is how Ashley's audience enables this behavior. Instead of calling out a 36-year-old woman for preying on teenagers, many of her viewers encourage it, sending donations and positive comments that reinforce Ashley's belief that her behavior is acceptable. The Santos relationship also revealed another disturbing aspect of Ashley's sexuality: her apparent attraction to situations that mirror incest. During one particularly graphic live stream, Ashley was asked about her sexual relationship with Santos, and she described it in detail while knowing her daughters were likely watching or would see the content later. This public discussion of her sex life, combined with her pattern of dating men young enough to be her sons, suggests a deeply disturbed relationship with appropriate boundaries and healthy sexuality. The psychological damage Ashley inflicted on her daughter through the Santos situation extends far beyond just stealing a crush. She taught her daughter that a mother's sexual desires are more important than her child's feelings. Women should compete with their own daughters for male attention. Betrayal by the person who should protect you most is normal. Your private feelings and vulnerabilities will be exploited for public entertainment. You cannot trust the person who is supposed to love you unconditionally. These lessons will likely impact Ashley's daughter's ability to form healthy relationships for the rest of her life. The betrayal by her own mother during such a formative time has created trauma that may take years of therapy to address. But Ashley's predatory behavior toward young men also reveals something crucial about her psychology. She's not just attracted to violence and danger, as evidenced by her prison boyfriends. She's also attracted to power imbalances where she can be the dominant party. With her prison boyfriends, Ashley holds power through her freedom and financial resources. With young men like Santos, she holds power through her age, experience, and financial stability. In both cases, she's seeking relationships where she can control and manipulate vulnerable people. This pattern of seeking power over others extends to how she treats her own daughters. Ashley doesn't see her children as individuals with their own needs and feelings. She sees them as extensions of herself, existing to serve her emotional and financial needs. The Santos situation also highlights how Ashley uses her children as props in her various dramas. When Santos stood her up for their planned meeting, Ashley made her daughters watch her cry and complain about being rejected by a teenager. She forced them to witness her emotional breakdown over a boy barely older than they were. This role reversal, where children are forced to comfort and support their parent through inappropriate romantic situations, is another form of emotional abuse. Ashley's daughters have been robbed of their childhood and forced into premature emotional maturity because their mother refuses to act like an adult. The financial aspect of Ashley's relationship with Santos also reveals her willingness to use money to manipulate young people. She flew him to Texas, paid for his accommodations, bought him gifts, and provided him with alcohol. This financial grooming is a classic predator tactic, using resources to create dependency and obligation. When Santos eventually tried to distance himself from Ashley, she responded with accusations of assault, claiming he had hurt her and showing supposed bruises on her arms. However, within hours of making these accusations, Ashley was back on live streams with Santos, laughing and joking as if nothing had happened. This pattern of accusation followed by reconciliation is another manipulation tactic. It keeps the victim off balance, never knowing when they might be accused of wrongdoing, while also demonstrating that Ashley's accusations aren't based on genuine concern for her safety, but rather on her need to control the narrative. The Santos saga ultimately ended when he told Ashley he couldn't do this anymore, and that the situation had spiraled out of control. Even a 19-year-old with limited life experience could recognize that his relationship with Ashley was unhealthy and destructive. But Ashley's response to Santos ending their relationship reveals the depth of her narcissistic rage. She didn't accept his decision gracefully or with any self-reflection about her behavior. Instead, she went on a vindictive campaign, making accusations and trying to damage his reputation because he dared to reject her. This pattern, love bombing followed by discard followed by vindictive retaliation, is classic narcissistic abuse. Ashley doesn't just hurt the people she claims to care about, she tries to destroy them when they attempt to escape her influence. The psychological profile that emerges from examining Ashley's relationships with young men like Santos is deeply disturbing. This is a woman who specifically targets vulnerable individuals, whether they're incarcerated killers with limited options or teenagers with limited life experience, and exploits their vulnerabilities for her own gratification. But perhaps most disturbing of all is how Ashley has normalized this predatory behavior for her daughters. They've watched their mother steal crushes, manipulate teenagers, and use financial resources to control young men. They're learning that this is how relationships work, that power and manipulation are normal parts of romantic interactions. The long-term impact of this modeling cannot be overstated. Ashley isn't just damaging her current victims. She's potentially creating a new generation of people who view manipulation and exploitation as normal relationship dynamics. And we're still not done exploring the depths of Ashley Trevino's depravity. The prison boyfriends and teenage victims are just part of a larger pattern of exploitation that extends to every aspect of her life, including how she's monetized her own children's trauma and turned their dysfunction into a profitable entertainment empire. In the next part of this series, we'll examine how Ashley has built her financial success on the systematic exploitation of her daughter's privacy, safety, and emotional well-being, and why thousands of people are now fighting to save these girls from their own mother. Ashley Trevino didn't just stumble into making money from her dysfunction. She built a calculated empire of exploitation with her own daughters as the primary product. Every tear they've shed, every moment of fear they've experienced, every violation of their privacy has been transformed into content that generates thousands of dollars in donations from viewers who can't look away from the train wreck. This isn't just bad parenting. This is systematic child exploitation disguised as family content, and it's happening in real time while thousands of people watch and pay for the privilege. The numbers tell the story of Ashley's priorities better than any explanation could. In a single live stream, Ashley can make anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 per day. Her highest earning stream brought in $112,000 in just 2.5 hours. Meanwhile, her daughters sleep on a shared air mattress on the floor, eat nothing but processed junk food, and have been forced into homeschooling because their mother's online behavior made their lives at school unbearable. But the financial disparity is just the surface level of Ashley's exploitation. The real damage lies in how she's weaponized every aspect of her daughters' lives for content, turning their most vulnerable moments into entertainment for strangers on the internet. When Ashley's younger daughter had to go to the hospital, Ashley's first instinct wasn't maternal concern. It was monetization. She told her live stream audience, "This is my sickly baby that I have to go take to the hospital and go get tested in a couple weeks. I'm not going to explain nothing else because she doesn't want me to." But then, mere minutes later, Ashley's tune changed. "If y'all want me to tell you about my baby girl's health, go ahead and send the galaxies." Galaxies are 15 donations on TikTok. Ashley was literally auctioning off her daughter's medical information to the highest bidder, treating her child's health crisis as a pay-per-view event. This isn't an isolated incident. It's Ashley's standard operating procedure. Every aspect of her daughters' lives has been commodified and sold to her audience. Their illnesses, their emotional breakdowns, their academic struggles, their social difficulties, all of it becomes content that generates revenue. During one particularly disturbing live stream, Ashley's daughter came into the room saying she had thrown up. Instead of immediately caring for her sick child, Ashley's first response was to accuse her of lying. "You just threw up? Why are you lying to me?" When the girl insisted she was telling the truth, Ashley continued dancing to her theme song, completely ignoring her daughter's distress while the camera kept rolling. The message was clear. The live stream and the potential donations were more important than her child's immediate needs. But Ashley's exploitation goes beyond just monetizing her daughter's crises. She's created an environment where her children exist solely to serve her content needs, with no consideration for their privacy, dignity, or emotional well-being. Ashley regularly discusses her daughter's personal information on live streams, their grades, their social struggles, their physical development, their relationships with their deceased father. Nothing is off limits if it can generate engagement and donations. When one daughter got a nose piercing without permission, Ashley didn't handle it as a private family matter. Instead, she FaceTimed her daughter live on stream and publicly berated her. "My nose is so perfect." No, your nose is not perfect. Your nose either. Bye. The humiliation was broadcast to thousands of viewers, turning a normal parent-child conflict into public entertainment. The daughter's embarrassment and hurt feelings became content that generated donations for Ashley. This pattern of public humiliation extends to every aspect of the girls' lives. Ashley has discussed their menstrual cycles on live streams, mocked their physical appearance, shared details about their academic performance, and even forced them to participate in conversations with her prison boyfriends. The psychological impact of this constant violation of privacy cannot be overstated. These girls are growing up with no sense of personal boundaries, no understanding that they have a right to privacy, and no protection from their mother's exploitation. During a podcast interview, Ashley's daughter expressed the emotional toll of this exposure. "I feel like I would rather go back to my old life. Like, we have money, but I don't like being online publicly. I'm growing up, that's why I'm homeschooled too. In the beginning at school, people noticed my mom, and I got a lot of stares in the cafeteria. So if I could, I honestly would go back to my old life, because being a nobody to people, because that's when I was more confident. I didn't care how I looked, and now, since I'm public, I care more about how I look and how I go out and stuff." This is a child describing how her mother's need for attention has destroyed her confidence and forced her into isolation. But Ashley's response to her daughter's pain reveals the depth of her narcissism. Instead of recognizing the harm she's causing, she dismisses her daughter's feelings and continues the exploitation. The living conditions Ashley provides for her daughters while spending thousands on herself reveal the calculated nature of her neglect. This isn't a family struggling financially. This is a woman who chooses to spend money on designer bags, first-class flights, and expensive restaurants while her children sleep on the floor. Ashley has spent $3,000 on Balenciaga slippers, $6,000 on Louis Vuitton bags in a single month, and $327 at the Cheesecake Factory for 2 people. She flies first class to Disneyland by herself while her daughters stay home. She spends $700 on grocery trips, buying nothing but hot Cheetos and candy. Meanwhile, her daughters share a single air mattress on the floor. When confronted about this during a podcast interview, Ashley's response was telling. "Now that I know they fixed up their room, I'm going to buy them a bed for Christmas, but I don't know if I should get them bunk beds because they're older, or if I should get them one bed to share." The casual way she discusses making her teenage daughters share a single bed while she spends thousands on luxury items reveals how completely she's prioritized her own comfort over her children's basic needs. But the financial neglect is just one aspect of Ashley's systematic exploitation. She's also created an environment where her daughters are forced to manage her emotional needs, essentially parentifying them and robbing them of their childhood. During live streams, Ashley's daughters often serve as her moderators, trying to prevent her from saying or doing things that will make their situation worse. They can be heard saying things like, "Mom, don't do this," and "Mom, don't say this," desperately trying to protect their mother from herself while simultaneously being exploited by her. This role reversal, where children are responsible for managing their parents' behavior, is a form of emotional abuse that can have lasting psychological consequences. Ashley's daughters have been forced into premature adulthood, taking on responsibilities that should belong to their mother. The exploitation extends to how Ashley uses her daughter's relationship with their deceased father for content. When their father passed away from leukemia in 2023, Ashley immediately began monetizing their grief. Instead of allowing her daughters to grieve privately, Ashley live-streamed their emotional reactions, discussed their father's death for donations, and even danced to songs with lyrics like My Baby Daddy while his funeral was taking place. When her daughters asked her to stop talking about their father on live streams because they were grieving and didn't want their private pain broadcast to strangers, Ashley's response was to make it about herself. It breaks my heart when my babies just say, I wish my dad was here. She then immediately pivoted to reading a donation comment that said, everything happens for a reason, using her children's grief as an opportunity to generate more engagement and sympathy from her audience. The psychological manipulation involved in this exploitation is sophisticated and deliberate. Ashley has created an environment where her daughter's survival depends on participating in their own exploitation. They know that their mother's income, and therefore their housing, food, and basic needs, comes from the live streams that violate their privacy and dignity. This creates an impossible situation for the girls. They can either participate in their own exploitation or risk losing the only stability they have. It's a form of financial coercion that ensures their compliance while maximizing Ashley's profit. Ashley has also weaponized her daughter's love for their deceased father to manipulate them into compliance. She frequently brings up their father's death when they resist participating in her content, using their grief as a tool to make them feel guilty for not supporting her work. The normalization of this exploitation has reached the point where Ashley's daughters don't even recognize how abnormal their situation is. During the podcast interview, when asked if their mother exploits situations for views, one daughter simply said, I'm going to be real. Yeah. The casual acceptance of this exploitation reveals how completely Ashley has normalized the commodification of her children's lives. They've been conditioned to accept that their pain, their privacy, and their dignity are all acceptable sacrifices for their mother's financial gain. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Ashley's exploitation empire is how she's managed to build an audience that actively participates in the abuse of her children. Every donation sent during moments of crisis, every engagement with content that violates the girl's privacy, every comment that encourages Ashley's behavior is a form of complicity in child exploitation. Ashley's top donors, the people who send her thousands of dollars, aren't just passive observers. They're active participants in a system that prioritizes entertainment value over child welfare. They're funding a lifestyle that treats children as content creators rather than human beings deserving of protection and privacy. The audience's role in this exploitation cannot be understated. Without the financial incentive provided by donations and engagement, Ashley's behavior would have no economic motivation. The viewers who pay to watch her exploit her children are as responsible for the harm being done as Ashley herself. Ashley has also created a feedback loop where the more dysfunction she displays, the more money she makes. This incentivizes increasingly extreme behavior, as she constantly needs to escalate the drama to maintain audience interest and donation levels. This escalation has led to increasingly dangerous situations for her daughters. Ashley has doxed their home address multiple times, leading to strangers showing up at their house. She's involved them in conflicts with other creators that have resulted in physical confrontations. She's exposed them to convicted killers and predatory behavior. Each escalation brings more viewers, more donations, and more money, creating a perverse incentive structure where Ashley's children's safety is inversely related to her income potential. The long-term psychological damage being inflicted on Ashley's daughters through this systematic exploitation is incalculable. They're learning that their worth is tied to their entertainment value, that their privacy has no value, and that the people who should protect them will instead exploit them for profit. They're also learning that dysfunction and chaos are normal, that healthy boundaries don't exist, and that love is conditional on compliance with exploitation. These lessons will impact their ability to form healthy relationships and maintain appropriate boundaries for the rest of their lives. But Ashley's exploitation empire represents something larger than just one family's dysfunction. It's a symptom of a system that allows children to be commodified for entertainment, where platforms profit from content that exploits minors, and where audiences pay to watch children being harmed. The Ashley Trevino case isn't just about one woman's bad choices. It's about a society that has created economic incentives for child exploitation, and then acts surprised when people like Ashley emerge to fill that market demand. And the most tragic part is that Ashley's daughters have no escape from this exploitation. They're trapped in a system where their survival depends on participating in their own abuse, where the very people who should protect them are the ones profiting from their pain. In the next part of this series, we'll explore how the internet community has responded to Ashley's exploitation of her children, the efforts being made to save these girls, and why Ashley's case has become a rallying point for people fighting against the commodification of childhood trauma. Because while Ashley may have built an empire on her daughter's suffering, there are people fighting to tear that empire down and give these girls the protection they deserve. Something unprecedented is happening in the Ashley Trevino case. Thousands of complete strangers are banding together to try and save two teenage girls from their own mother. What started as casual criticism of Ashley's parenting has evolved into a coordinated effort to document evidence, contact authorities, and expose the systematic abuse happening in real time on social media platforms. This isn't just internet drama or cancel culture. This is a digital intervention where people who have never met Ashley's daughters are fighting harder to protect them than their own mother ever has. The movement began organically as viewers started noticing the disturbing patterns in Ashley's content. Individual comments pointing out concerning behavior gradually coalesced into dedicated forums where people began systematically documenting Ashley's actions, creating timelines of abuse, and organizing efforts to contact Child Protective Services. What makes the situation unique is the real-time nature of the evidence. Unlike historical abuse cases where investigators must piece together what happened after the fact, Ashley's exploitation of her daughters is being broadcast live, documented automatically, and preserved by viewers who recognize they're witnessing something that needs to be stopped. The documentation effort is staggering in its scope and organization. Dedicated groups have created spreadsheets tracking Ashley's spending versus her daughter's living conditions, compiled video evidence of her neglect and emotional abuse, and maintained detailed records of every concerning incident broadcast on her live streams. One particularly damning compilation shows Ashley spending over $10,000 on luxury items in a single month while her daughters sleep on an air mattress. Another tracks every time Ashley has prioritized her prison boyfriends over her children's needs, creating a pattern of neglect that spans years. But the most powerful evidence comes from Ashley herself. Her own words, broadcast to thousands of viewers, provide an unfiltered look at her mindset and priorities. When she says things like, "If y'all want me to tell you about my baby girl's health, go ahead and send the galaxies," she's literally admitting to monetizing her child's medical crisis. The internet community has also identified and documented the various ways Ashley violates her daughter's privacy and dignity. They've cataloged instances where she's discussed their menstrual cycles, shared their academic struggles, broadcast their emotional breakdowns, and forced them to interact with convicted killers. This documentation serves multiple purposes. First, it creates an undeniable record of Ashley's behavior that can't be deleted or denied. Second, it provides evidence for authorities who might otherwise struggle to understand the scope of the abuse. Third, it demonstrates to Ashley that her actions are being watched and recorded, potentially deterring some of her worst behavior. The CPS reporting campaign represents one of the most coordinated efforts to protect children that social media has ever seen. Hundreds of people have filed reports with Texas Child Protective Services, providing detailed evidence of Ashley's neglect, exploitation, and emotional abuse of her daughters. Ashley herself has admitted to receiving like 20 CPS cases in recent months, treating it as a badge of honor rather than recognizing it as evidence that her behavior is genuinely concerning to anyone who witnesses it. Her response to these reports reveals her complete lack of self-awareness. Do you know how many CPS cases I've had on me in the last 4 months and I still have custody of my kids? The fact that Ashley brags about evading CPS investigations rather than reflecting on why so many people are concerned about her children's welfare demonstrates the depth of her narcissism and her inability to recognize the harm she's causing. But the internet community's efforts go beyond just reporting to authorities. They've also worked to educate Ashley's audience about the signs of child exploitation, hoping to reduce the financial incentives that drive her behavior. Educational posts explain how Ashley's content monetizes child abuse, how donations during crisis moments enable exploitation, and how engagement with her streams directly contributes to the harm being done to her daughters. The goal is to reduce Ashley's income by making her audience aware of their complicity in child abuse. Some viewers have also attempted direct intervention, using Ashley's live streams to confront her about her treatment of her daughters. These confrontations often result in Ashley becoming defensive and angry, but they also create moments where her mask slips and her true priorities become clear. When viewers point out that her daughters don't have proper beds, Ashley's response isn't shame or a promise to do better, it's anger at being called out. When they question her decision to expose her children to convicted killers, she doesn't express concern for their safety. She defends the killers and attacks the people raising concerns. These confrontations serve an important purpose by forcing Ashley to articulate her priorities in real time, creating additional evidence of her mindset, and revealing the extent to which she prioritizes her own needs over her children's welfare. The internet community has also worked to amplify the voices of Ashley's daughters when they express discomfort or distress. During the podcast interview where Ashley's daughter said she wanted to go back to her old life before the internet fame, viewers made sure the clip was widely shared and preserved. This amplification serves multiple purposes. It ensures that the girls' own words about their situation are heard and documented. It demonstrates that they're not willing participants in their exploitation, but rather victims who would prefer privacy and normalcy. And it creates pressure on Ashley by showing that people are listening to and caring about her daughter's expressed wishes. The community has also identified and called out the people who enable Ashley's behavior. Her top donors, the people who send her thousands of dollars during her most exploitative moments, have been identified and criticized for their role in funding child abuse. This accountability extends to other creators who collaborate with Ashley or give her platforms to spread her dysfunction. When podcasters interview Ashley without challenging her behavior, or when other TikTokers engage with her content positively, the community makes sure they understand they're enabling child exploitation. The pressure campaign has had some success. Several creators who initially collaborated with Ashley have distanced themselves after being confronted with evidence of her treatment of her daughters. Some platforms have removed her content or restricted her ability to monetize it, but perhaps the most important aspect of the internet community's response is how it's documented the failure of existing systems to protect Ashley's children. despite overwhelming evidence of neglect and exploitation, despite hundreds of CPS reports, despite the girls themselves expressing that they're unhappy with their situation, the official systems designed to protect children have failed to intervene effectively. This failure has led to broader conversations about how child protection laws need to be updated for the digital age. Ashley's case demonstrates how traditional definitions of abuse and neglect don't adequately address the new forms of exploitation enabled by social media platforms. The community has also highlighted how platforms like TikTok profit from content that exploits children while claiming to have policies against such behavior. Ashley's ability to monetize her daughter's trauma demonstrates the gap between platform policies and their enforcement. Educational efforts have extended to explaining the long-term psychological damage being inflicted on Ashley's daughters. Mental health professionals have provided analysis of how constant privacy violations, parentification, and exposure to dysfunction will impact the girls' development and future relationships. This education serves to counter Ashley's narrative that she's providing her daughters with opportunities and financial benefits. By explaining the psychological costs of exploitation, the community helps viewers understand that no amount of money justifies the harm being done to these children. The international nature of the response has also been remarkable. People from around the world have expressed concern for Ashley's daughters, demonstrating that child welfare transcends cultural and geographic boundaries. The universal recognition that Ashley's behavior is harmful validates the concerns of those trying to help. Some community members have also worked to provide resources and support for the daughters themselves. While direct contact is limited due to Ashley's control over their access to the outside world, efforts have been made to ensure they know that people care about their welfare and want to help them. The documentation efforts have also revealed patterns in Ashley's behavior that might not be apparent from individual incidents. By tracking her actions over time, the community has shown how her exploitation of her daughters has escalated, how her spending priorities have remained consistently selfish, and how her responses to criticism follow predictable patterns. This pattern recognition is crucial for understanding that Ashley's behavior isn't a series of isolated poor choices, but rather a systematic approach to exploiting her children for profit. The consistency of her prioritization of money over her daughter's welfare demonstrates that this is her deliberate strategy, not accidental neglect. The community has also worked to preserve evidence that Ashley attempts to delete or hide. When she removes particularly damaging content or tries to control the narrative around her behavior, community members ensure that the evidence remains available for authorities and future reference. This preservation effort is crucial because Ashley has shown a pattern of trying to rewrite history when her behavior is criticized. By maintaining independent records of her actions, the community prevents her from gaslighting her audience or authorities about what actually happened. The response to Ashley's case has also sparked broader conversations about the responsibility of social media users when they witness child exploitation. The community has grappled with questions about when observation becomes complicity and how to balance documentation with intervention. These conversations have led to the development of best practices for reporting suspected child abuse on social media platforms and for supporting children who are being exploited online. Ashley's case has become a learning experience for how to respond to similar situations in the future. The emotional toll on community members who have invested time and energy in trying to help Ashley's daughters cannot be understated. Many have expressed frustration at the limitations of their ability to intervene and heartbreak at watching children suffer while feeling powerless to stop it. But their efforts have not been in vain. The documentation they've created, the reports they've filed, and the pressure they've applied have all contributed to increased scrutiny of Ashley's behavior and growing awareness of the harm being done to her daughters. The Ashley Trevino case represents a new model for how communities can respond to child exploitation in the digital age. It demonstrates both the power and the limitations of collective action in protecting vulnerable children from their own parents. In the next part of this series, we'll explore how Ashley has responded to this pressure campaign, the ways she's tried to deflect criticism and maintain control over the narrative, and why her reactions have only served to confirm the concerns of those trying to protect her daughters. Because while thousands of strangers fight to save Ashley's daughters, Ashley herself continues to prioritize her own needs over her children's welfare, proving that sometimes the greatest threat to a child's safety comes from the person who should protect them most. When thousands of people began calling out Ashley Trevino's exploitation of her daughters, her response revealed everything you need to know about her character. Instead of self-reflection, remorse, or any attempt to change her behavior, Ashley declared war on reality itself, employing every manipulation tactic in the narcissist's playbook to deflect criticism and maintain her profitable exploitation empire. This isn't just a woman defending herself against unfair attacks. This is a masterclass in how abusers respond when their behavior is exposed. And it provides crucial insight into the psychology of someone who sees her own children as nothing more than revenue streams. Ashley's first line of defense is always victimhood. No matter how damning the evidence against her, no matter how clear the harm she's causing her daughters, Ashley immediately positions herself as the real victim in every situation. When confronted about her daughters sleeping on an air mattress while she spends thousands on luxury items, Ashley doesn't express shame or promise to do better. Instead, she complains about being attacked by haters who don't understand her situation. "Y'all are really trying to get my kids taken from me, and it's not going to happen," Ashley whines during one live stream, treating legitimate concerns about child welfare as personal persecution. "Do you know how many CPS cases I've had on me in the last 4 months, and I still have custody of my kids?" The fact that Ashley brags about evading multiple CPS investigations, rather than questioning why so many people are concerned about her children, reveals her complete inability to engage with reality. In her mind, the problem isn't her behavior, it's that people are jealous of her success and want to tear her down. This victim mentality extends to every aspect of criticism Ashley receives. When people point out that she's dating convicted killers while her daughters watch, she doesn't acknowledge the potential harm to her children. Instead, she claims people are judging her for her choices and trying to control her life. When viewers express concern about her exposing her daughters to men who have murdered children, Ashley's response is to defend the killers and attack the people raising concerns. She never once considers that maybe, just maybe, the people worried about her daughter's safety might have a point. Ashley's second major defense mechanism is gaslighting, the systematic attempt to make others question their own perception of reality. She employs this tactic constantly, trying to rewrite history and convince her audience that what they're seeing with their own eyes isn't actually happening. When confronted with video evidence of her neglecting her daughters, Ashley claims the footage is taken out of context or that people are misunderstanding what they're seeing. When her own words are quoted back to her, she insists she didn't mean it that way or that people are twisting her statements. One of the most egregious examples of Ashley's gaslighting occurred when she was confronted about monetizing her daughter's medical crisis. Despite clear video evidence of her asking for donations in exchange for sharing her child's health information, Ashley claimed she was just trying to update her viewers and that people were making something out of nothing. This gaslighting extends to her treatment of her daughters themselves. When they express discomfort with her behavior or ask her to stop sharing their private information, Ashley dismisses their concerns and tells them they're being dramatic or don't understand how the internet works. The psychological impact of this gaslighting on Ashley's daughters cannot be overstated. They're being taught to doubt their own perceptions, to accept that their feelings don't matter, and to believe that their mother's version of reality is the only valid one. Ashley's third major tactic is deflection, the art of changing the subject whenever she's confronted with uncomfortable truths about her behavior. She's mastered the ability to pivot away from legitimate criticism and redirect attention to irrelevant topics or perceived slights against herself. When people point out that her daughters don't have proper beds, Ashley doesn't address the issue directly. Instead, she launches into complaints about haters trying to bring her down, or starts talking about how much money she makes and how successful she is. When confronted about her relationship with Santos, the 19-year-old she pursued after her daughter expressed interest in him, Ashley doesn't acknowledge the inappropriate nature of the situation. Instead, she claims she didn't know his real age and shifts the conversation to how she's being attacked for her personal choices. This deflection serves multiple purposes. It allows Ashley to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. It confuses the conversation by introducing irrelevant topics, and it positions her as the victim rather than the perpetrator of harm. Perhaps Ashley's most insidious tactic is her use of her daughters as human shields against criticism. Whenever the pressure becomes too intense, Ashley brings her daughters on camera and uses their presence to deflect accountability. During one particularly heated confrontation about her parenting, Ashley called her daughter into the room and asked her to defend their living situation. The teenager, clearly uncomfortable and caught between protecting her mother and acknowledging their problems, gave hesitant responses that Ashley then used as proof that everything was fine. This weaponization of her children is particularly cruel because it forces them to choose between protecting themselves and protecting their mother. It also puts them in the impossible position of having to defend their own exploitation on camera for their mother's audience. Ashley has also perfected the art of selective disclosure, sharing just enough information to control the narrative while hiding the most damaging details. She'll admit to minor issues while downplaying or completely omitting the most serious problems. For example, Ashley will acknowledge that her daughters sleep on an air mattress, but frame it as a temporary situation that she's working on fixing. She won't mention that this has been going on for months, while she spends thousands on luxury items for herself. She'll admit that she dates inmates, but present it as a personal choice that doesn't affect her children. She won't discuss the graphic conversations her daughters overhear or the psychological impact of being forced to call convicted killers Daddy. This selective disclosure allows Ashley to appear transparent and honest while actually concealing the full extent of her harmful behavior. It's a sophisticated manipulation tactic that makes her seem more credible, while protecting her from the full consequences of her actions. When all else fails, Ashley resorts to threats and intimidation. She's threatened to sue people who criticize her, claimed she's going to expose her critics, and suggested that people who call CPS on her will face consequences. These threats serve multiple purposes. They're designed to silence criticism by making people afraid of retaliation. They also allow Ashley to feel powerful and in control when she's actually facing legitimate accountability for her actions. But perhaps most importantly, these threats reveal Ashley's true character. A mother who was genuinely concerned about her children's welfare would welcome scrutiny and work to address any legitimate concerns. Ashley's response of threats and intimidation shows that she's more interested in protecting her image than protecting her daughters. Ashley has also attempted to manipulate the narrative by claiming that criticism of her behavior is actually harmful to her daughters. She argues that people calling CPS or expressing concern are traumatizing her children and making their lives worse. This is a particularly insidious form of manipulation because it attempts to make the people trying to help feel guilty for their efforts. Ashley is essentially arguing that exposing child abuse is worse than the abuse itself, and that people should stay silent to avoid upsetting her daughters. The reality, of course, is that Ashley's behavior is what's traumatizing her daughters, not the people trying to help them. But by framing criticism as harmful to her children, Ashley attempts to silence her critics while positioning herself as their protector. Throughout all of these defensive maneuvers, Ashley has never once genuinely apologized for her behavior or acknowledged the harm she's causing her daughters. Her apologies are always qualified with excuses, followed by justifications, or immediately contradicted by continued harmful behavior. When Ashley does offer what appears to be an apology, it's always for the wrong things. She'll apologize for letting people misunderstand her actions rather than for the actions themselves. She'll express regret for causing drama rather than for exploiting her children. These non-apologies reveal that Ashley doesn't actually believe she's done anything wrong. She sees the problem as other people's reactions to her behavior, not the behavior itself. Ashley's response to criticism has also revealed her complete lack of empathy for her daughter's experiences. When they express discomfort with her behavior or ask for privacy, Ashley dismisses their feelings and continues the harmful behavior. During the podcast interview where her daughter expressed wanting to go back to her old life before the internet fame, Ashley showed no recognition of her child's pain or any willingness to change her behavior to address her daughter's concerns. This lack of empathy extends to Ashley's complete inability to understand why people are concerned about her children. She genuinely seems to believe that providing them with money and material goods, which she doesn't actually do, justifies any amount of emotional harm and exploitation. The pattern of Ashley's responses to criticism reveals a woman who is fundamentally incapable of putting her children's needs before her own. Every defensive tactic she employs is designed to protect her ability to continue exploiting her daughters, not to address their welfare or safety. Ashley's war against reality has also included attempts to control information and limit her daughters' access to outside perspectives. She's moved them to homeschooling, limited their social interactions, and tried to control their access to social media where they might see criticism of her behavior. This isolation serves multiple purposes. It prevents her daughters from developing relationships with people who might recognize the abuse and intervene. It limits their exposure to normal family dynamics that might help them understand how abnormal their situation is. And it ensures that Ashley remains their primary source of information about what's normal and acceptable. The most tragic aspect of Ashley's defensive campaign is how it demonstrates her complete prioritization of her own image over her daughter's welfare. Every tactic she employs is designed to protect her reputation and maintain her income stream, with no consideration for how her behavior affects her children. Ashley would rather fight thousands of people trying to help her daughters than make even the smallest changes to improve their lives. She would rather threaten and intimidate critics than provide her children with basic necessities like proper beds. This reveals the true nature of Ashley's relationship with her daughters. They exist to serve her needs, not the other way around. They're not children to be protected and nurtured. They're assets to be exploited and defended when that exploitation is threatened. In the next part of this series, we'll explore the broader implications of Ashley's case for child protection in the digital age, how her story reflects larger problems with social media platforms and their role in enabling exploitation, and what her case teaches us about the new forms of abuse that technology has made possible. Because Ashley Trevino isn't just one woman making bad choices, she's a symptom of a system that has created financial incentives for child exploitation and then failed to protect the children being harmed. Ashley Trevino didn't build her exploitation empire in a vacuum. She built it on platforms that are specifically designed to reward the exact behavior she exhibits. Every dollar she makes from monetizing her daughter's trauma, every viewer who pays to watch children being emotionally abused, every algorithm that promotes her content represents a fundamental failure of the systems that claim to protect minors online. This isn't just about one woman's twisted priorities. It's about how major corporations have created economic incentives for child exploitation and then profited from the suffering of vulnerable children while hiding behind terms of service they refuse to enforce. TikTok's algorithm is particularly insidious in how it rewards dysfunction and trauma. The platform's engagement-driven model means that content generating strong emotional reactions, shock, outrage, concern, disgust, gets pushed to more viewers, creating a perverse incentive structure where the most harmful content often receives the widest distribution. Ashley's most exploitative moments consistently generate her highest engagement rates. When she monetizes her daughter's medical crisis, when she forces her children to interact with convicted killers, when she publicly humiliates them for entertainment, these are the moments that go viral, that generate the most donations, that the algorithm rewards with increased visibility. The platform's live streaming feature, which allows real-time donations during broadcasts, has essentially turned child exploitation into a pay-per-view event. Viewers can send money directly to Ashley while watching her abuse her daughters in real time, creating an immediate financial reward for harmful behavior. TikTok's Galaxy donation system, where viewers can send gifts worth $15 each, has become Ashley's primary revenue stream. The platform takes a percentage of every donation, meaning TikTok directly profits from content that exploits children. When Ashley asks for galaxies in exchange for sharing her daughter's medical information, TikTok gets a cut of that transaction. The company's response to reports about Ashley's content reveals the inadequacy of their child protection policies. Despite overwhelming evidence of exploitation, despite hundreds of reports from concerned viewers, despite clear violations of their own terms of service, Ashley continues to monetize her daughter's trauma on the platform. When Ashley's accounts are occasionally suspended or restricted, she simply creates new ones and continues the same behavior. The platform's inability or unwillingness to implement effective permanent bans for child exploitation demonstrates that their policies are more about public relations than actual child protection. TikTok's community guidelines prohibit content that exploits minors and puts minors at risk, but these policies are meaningless if they're not enforced. Ashley's entire content strategy revolves around exploiting her daughters, yet she continues to profit from the platform with minimal interference. The algorithm's promotion of Ashley's content also exposes vulnerable viewers to harmful messaging about family dynamics, relationships, and acceptable treatment of children. Young viewers watching Ashley's streams are learning that exploitation is normal, that children exist to serve their parents' needs, and that dysfunction can be profitable. This normalization of abuse extends beyond just Ashley's immediate audience. The platform's recommendation system pushes her content to users who might not have sought it out, spreading her toxic messaging to a broader audience and potentially inspiring copycat behavior. The live streaming format also makes it nearly impossible for the platform to moderate content effectively. By the time harmful content is reported and reviewed, the damage has already been done. Ashley can exploit her daughters in real time, collect donations from viewers, and then delete the evidence before moderators can take action. This creates a system where the most harmful content often has the shortest lifespan on the platform, making it difficult for authorities to gather evidence while ensuring that the financial benefits to creators like Ashley are immediate and substantial. The platform's age verification systems are also woefully inadequate for protecting minors who appear in content created by adults. While TikTok requires users to be 13 or older to create accounts, there are no meaningful protections for children who appear in content created by their parents or guardians. Ashley's daughters have no control over their appearance in her content, no ability to consent to their exploitation, and no recourse when their privacy is violated for their mother's profit. The platform treats them as props in Ashley's content rather than as individuals with rights that need protection. The international nature of TikTok's user base also complicates enforcement efforts. Ashley's audience includes viewers from around the world, many of whom may not understand the legal and cultural context of her behavior or the resources available to help her daughters. This global reach amplifies the harm being done to Ashley's daughters while making it more difficult for local authorities to understand the scope of the exploitation or to coordinate effective intervention efforts. The platform's data collection practices also raise serious concerns about the privacy and safety of minors who appear in content. TikTok collects extensive data about user behavior, viewing patterns, and engagement metrics, potentially creating detailed profiles of Ashley's daughters' exploitation that could be used for targeted advertising or other commercial purposes. The company's Chinese ownership and data sharing practices add another layer of concern about how information about exploited American children might be used or shared with foreign entities. But TikTok isn't the only platform enabling Ashley's exploitation of her daughters. Instagram, where Ashley previously documented her relationships with convicted killers, allowed her to post photos of her young daughters visiting murderers in prison and calling them daddy. The platform's visual focus made it particularly effective for Ashley's early exploitation efforts, allowing her to create a curated narrative about her prison wife lifestyle while normalizing her daughter's exposure to violent criminals. Instagram's failure to remove content showing children visiting convicted killers or to question why a mother was bringing her daughters to meet murderers demonstrates the platform's inadequate child protection measures. YouTube, where Ashley has appeared on various podcasts and interviews, has provided her with additional platforms to spread her toxic messaging and defend her exploitation of her daughters. The platform's monetization features have allowed creators who interview Ashley to profit from content that promotes child exploitation, creating additional financial incentives for giving her a platform to spread her harmful messaging. Podcast platforms and other media outlets that have featured Ashley have also contributed to the normalization of her behavior by treating her exploitation of her daughters as entertainment rather than as evidence of serious child abuse. The broader social media ecosystem has created a perfect storm for child exploitation. Platforms compete for user attention by rewarding increasingly extreme content. Creators seek to maximize engagement through shocking behavior, and audiences pay for access to dysfunction and trauma. This system inevitably produces cases like Ashley Trevino, where the financial incentives for exploiting children are so strong that even maternal instincts are overwhelmed by the profit motive. The platform's terms of service and community guidelines are written to sound protective of children, but the reality is that enforcement is inconsistent, penalties are minimal, and the financial rewards for violation often outweigh the risks of punishment. Ashley's case demonstrates how easily these systems can be gamed by determined exploiters. She's learned to walk right up to the line of what's technically allowed while maximizing the harm she can cause within those boundaries. When her content is removed or her accounts are suspended, she simply adapts her tactics, creates new accounts, or moves to different platforms. The lack of coordination between platforms means that being banned from one doesn't prevent her from continuing her exploitation on others. The platform's reliance on user reports for content moderation also creates opportunities for exploitation. Ashley has learned to mobilize her supporters to mass report critics while defending her own harmful content, gaming the system to silence opposition while protecting her revenue streams. The algorithmic promotion of controversial content also means that Ashley's most harmful moments often receive the widest distribution, maximizing both the immediate harm to her daughters and the long-term damage to their privacy and dignity. The platform's advertising models also create indirect financial incentives for child exploitation. Controversial creators like Ashley generate high engagement rates, which makes them valuable to advertisers and increases the platform's revenue from their content. Even when platforms don't directly monetize exploitative content, they benefit from the increased user engagement and time spent on their platforms that such content generates. The global nature of these platforms also makes it difficult for any single jurisdiction to effectively regulate their behavior or hold them accountable for enabling child exploitation. Ashley's case has exposed the fundamental inadequacy of current approaches to child protection on social media platforms. Self-regulation has failed, user reporting systems are easily gamed, and the financial incentives for exploitation continue to outweigh the risks of punishment. The platform's response to Ashley's case will be a crucial test of their commitment to child protection. If they continue to allow her to profit from exploiting her daughters, it will demonstrate that their policies are meaningless and their claims about protecting children are nothing more than public relations rhetoric. But even if Ashley is eventually banned from all major platforms, her case has already demonstrated how easily the current system can be exploited and how many children can be harmed before any meaningful action is taken. The Ashley Trevino case represents a watershed moment for child protection in the digital age. It has exposed the fundamental flaws in how social media platforms approach child safety and demonstrated the urgent need for comprehensive reform. In the next part of this series, we'll explore what meaningful reform might look like, how other countries are approaching these issues, and what lessons Ashley's case teaches us about protecting children in an increasingly digital world. Because until we address the systemic issues that enabled Ashley's exploitation empire, there will be more Ashley Trevinos, more exploited children, and more platforms profiting from their suffering. Ashley Trevino's exploitation empire doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a larger ecosystem of dysfunction that spreads like a virus through social media, infecting everyone it touches and creating new victims far beyond her own daughters. Understanding the full scope of Ashley's impact requires examining how her behavior influences other creators, normalizes abuse for her audience, and creates a template for exploitation that others are already copying. This isn't just about one family's dysfunction anymore. It's about how Ashley has become a case study in monetized child abuse that's inspiring imitators and teaching a generation of viewers that exploitation is not only acceptable but profitable. The most immediate victims of Ashley's influence are the other creators who get pulled into her orbit. Young, vulnerable people seeking attention and money online see Ashley's success and begin adopting her tactics, not fully understanding the psychological and legal consequences of what they're doing. Santos, the 19-year-old who became entangled with Ashley, represents just one example of how her toxicity spreads to others. What started as a young man trying to build a social media following ended with him being manipulated, exploited, and publicly humiliated by a woman twice his age. The psychological damage inflicted on Santos during his relationship with Ashley extends far beyond their brief romantic involvement. He was thrust into a public spotlight he wasn't prepared for, subjected to scrutiny and criticism from thousands of strangers, and forced to navigate complex adult situations while still essentially a teenager. Ashley's treatment of Santos also demonstrates her pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals who lack the resources or experience to protect themselves from her manipulation. She specifically seeks out people who are desperate for attention, money, or validation, then exploits those vulnerabilities for her own gain. The other creators who have collaborated with Ashley or appeared on her streams have also been contaminated by association with her brand of exploitation. Many have faced criticism and backlash for enabling her behavior, forcing them to choose between maintaining their relationship with Ashley and preserving their own reputations. Some creators have distanced themselves from Ashley after learning about her treatment of her daughters, but others continue to collaborate with her, prioritizing the engagement and views her controversy generates over any ethical concerns about child exploitation. This creates a network effect where Ashley's toxicity spreads through the creator community, normalizing her behavior and making it seem like just another form of content creation rather than systematic child abuse. The audience that Ashley has cultivated represents another vector for the spread of her toxic influence. Her viewers aren't passive consumers. They're active participants in her exploitation ecosystem, and many are learning to replicate her tactics in their own lives and content. Ashley's comment sections are filled with viewers who celebrate her authenticity and realness, treating her exploitation of her daughters as entertainment rather than recognizing it as abuse. These viewers are being conditioned to see child exploitation as normal and acceptable. Some of Ashley's most dedicated followers have begun creating their own content that mimics her style, sharing inappropriate details about their own children's lives, monetizing family dysfunction, and treating their kids as content creators rather than as children who deserve protection. This copycat behavior is particularly concerning because it suggests that Ashley's influence is creating a new generation of parents who see their children primarily as revenue streams, rather than as individuals with rights and needs. The normalization of Ashley's behavior also extends to how her audience views relationships and family dynamics. Viewers who regularly consume her content are being taught that children exist to serve their parents' financial needs. Privacy and dignity are luxuries that can be sold for the right price. Dysfunction and chaos are entertaining and profitable. Violent criminals can make acceptable romantic partners and father figures. Maternal love is conditional on compliance with exploitation. These lessons have implications far beyond Ashley's immediate audience. As her viewers internalize these toxic messages, they carry them into their own relationships, potentially perpetuating cycles of abuse and exploitation. The educational impact of Ashley's content is particularly concerning when considering her young audience. Many of her viewers are teenagers or young adults who are still forming their understanding of healthy relationships and appropriate boundaries. For these viewers, Ashley's content serves as a twisted form of sex education and relationship modeling, teaching them that exploitation, manipulation, and dysfunction are normal aspects of romantic and family relationships. The international reach of Ashley's content also means that her toxic influence extends beyond American cultural contexts, potentially spreading harmful ideas about family dynamics and child welfare to audiences around the world. Ashley's influence on the broader prison wife community represents another concerning aspect of her impact. Her success has inspired other women to pursue relationships with convicted killers, often documenting these relationships on social media and exposing their own children to dangerous individuals. The romanticization of relationships with violent criminals that Ashley promotes has contributed to a subculture where dating murderers is seen as edgy and authentic, rather than as evidence of serious psychological problems. This normalization of relationships with violent criminals has real-world consequences, as it encourages women to put themselves and their children at risk, while treating serious crimes as romantic backstories rather than as evidence of danger. Ashley's case has also revealed the inadequacy of existing support systems for recognizing and addressing new forms of child exploitation. Traditional child protection agencies are often unprepared to deal with cases where abuse is being broadcast live on social media platforms. The real-time nature of Ashley's exploitation creates challenges for intervention that existing systems aren't equipped to handle. By the time reports are filed and investigated, new incidents of abuse have already occurred and been monetized. The global nature of Ashley's audience also complicates intervention efforts, as authorities must navigate complex jurisdictional issues while trying to protect children who are being exploited for an international audience. Ashley's influence on platform policies and enforcement represents another area where her impact extends beyond her immediate victims. Her ability to continue monetizing child exploitation, despite numerous reports and violations, has demonstrated the inadequacy of current content moderation systems. Other creators have learned from Ashley's example that platform policies are largely toothless, encouraging them to push boundaries and test limits without fear of meaningful consequences. The financial success Ashley has achieved through exploitation has also created a perverse incentive structure that encourages other creators to adopt similar tactics, knowing that controversy and dysfunction often translate to higher engagement and revenue. The media coverage of Ashley's case has also contributed to the spread of her influence, often treating her exploitation of her daughters as entertainment rather than as a serious child welfare issue. Podcasters and content creators who interview Ashley or discuss her case often focus on the sensational aspects of her story rather than on the harm being done to her daughters, inadvertently promoting her brand and increasing her visibility. This media attention has helped Ashley build her audience and increase her revenue, demonstrating how traditional media can inadvertently enable and profit from child exploitation. The psychological impact of Ashley's content on her audience extends beyond just normalizing exploitation. Regular exposure to her dysfunction and chaos can be traumatizing for viewers, particularly those who have experienced similar abuse in their own lives. Some viewers report feeling triggered or re-traumatized by Ashley's content, yet continue watching due to a combination of morbid curiosity and trauma bonding with her daughter's situation. This creates a cycle where Ashley's content both exploits her daughters and traumatizes her audience, spreading psychological harm far beyond her immediate family. The economic impact of Ashley's success also sends troubling messages about what society values and rewards. Her ability to make more money in a single live stream than many people make in a year demonstrates that our economic systems can reward the worst possible behavior. This economic validation of child exploitation encourages others to view their own children as potential revenue streams, contributing to the commodification of childhood and family relationships. Ashley's case has also exposed the limitations of current legal frameworks for addressing digital age child exploitation. Existing laws often struggle to address cases where abuse is being broadcast live, monetized through digital platforms, and consumed by global audiences. The complexity of prosecuting cases that span multiple platforms, jurisdictions, and legal systems creates opportunities for exploiters like Ashley to operate with relative impunity. The technological aspects of Ashley's exploitation also create new challenges for child protection. The ability to live stream abuse in real time, monetize it immediately, and distribute it globally represents a fundamental shift in how child exploitation can occur. Traditional approaches to child protection that rely on after-the-fact investigation and intervention are inadequate for addressing abuse that is happening live and being immediately monetized. The data collection and algorithmic promotion aspects of social media platforms also create new forms of harm that existing legal frameworks don't address. Ashley's daughters are being profiled, tracked, and targeted by algorithms in ways that would be illegal if done by traditional media companies. Ashley's influence on the broader conversation about child protection has been largely negative, as her case is often used to argue against intervention rather than to support better protection systems. Her ability to evade consequences while continuing to exploit her daughters is sometimes cited as evidence that child protection efforts are futile or overreaching, rather than as proof that current systems are inadequate. This misuse of Ashley's case to argue against child protection efforts represents another way her influence spreads beyond her immediate victims, potentially making it harder to protect other children from similar exploitation. The long-term societal impact of Ashley's influence is still unfolding, but early indicators suggest that her normalization of child exploitation is contributing to broader cultural shifts around privacy, consent, and the commodification of family relationships. As more parents follow Ashley's example and begin monetizing their children's lives, we risk creating a generation of children who grow up believing that their primary value lies in their entertainment potential rather than in their inherent worth as human beings. In the next part of this series, we'll explore potential solutions to the problems Ashley's case has exposed, examining how other countries are addressing similar issues and what reforms might be necessary to protect children in the digital age. Because understanding the scope of Ashley's toxic influence is only the first step. The real challenge lies in developing systems that can prevent future Ashley Trevinos from exploiting their children for profit while the world watches and pays for the privilege. After months of documented abuse, hundreds of CPS reports, and overwhelming evidence of systematic child exploitation, something unprecedented is beginning to happen in the Ashley Trevino case. The very systems that failed to protect her daughters for so long are finally starting to respond, but not in the ways anyone expected. This isn't the story of authorities swooping in to save the day. It's the story of how sustained public pressure, coordinated documentation efforts, and the sheer volume of evidence finally forced a broken system to acknowledge what thousands of strangers could see clearly. Ashley Trevino is destroying her own children for money. The first crack in Ashley's armor came not from official channels, but from the platforms themselves. After months of reports and negative publicity, TikTok began taking more aggressive action against Ashley's accounts. Her main account was suspended multiple times, forcing her to create new profiles and rebuild her audience repeatedly. But Ashley's response to these suspensions revealed the depth of her addiction to exploitation. Instead of using the forced breaks to reflect on her behavior or focus on her daughter's needs, she immediately began creating new accounts and developing strategies to evade platform restrictions. She started using her daughter's accounts to continue streaming, essentially forcing them to become the face of their own exploitation. When those accounts were also restricted, she began appearing on other creators' streams as a guest, maintaining her presence and revenue stream while technically complying with her bans. This cat and mouse game with platform enforcement demonstrated Ashley's complete unwillingness to change her behavior voluntarily. Even when faced with consequences for her actions, her only concern was finding new ways to continue exploiting her daughters. The documentation efforts by concerned viewers began to have real impact when compiled evidence started reaching the right people. Child advocacy organizations, legal experts, and journalists began taking notice of Ashley's case, bringing professional expertise to bear on what had previously been dismissed as internet drama. Legal analysts who reviewed the compiled evidence expressed shock at the systematic nature of Ashley's exploitation and the clear violations of existing child protection laws. Many noted that if Ashley's behavior were happening offline, she would likely face criminal charges for child endangerment and exploitation. The involvement of professional advocates also helped legitimize the concerns of Ashley's critics, making it harder for authorities to dismiss reports as harassment or overreaction from internet trolls. Child psychologists who reviewed Ashley's content provided expert analysis of the psychological damage being inflicted on her daughters, documenting how the constant privacy violations, parentification, and exposure to dysfunction would impact their development and future relationships. These professional assessments provided crucial context for understanding that Ashley's behavior wasn't just inappropriate, it was actively harmful to her children's psychological development and constituted a form of ongoing trauma. The international attention Ashley's case began receiving also created pressure on American authorities to take action. Media outlets in other countries began covering her story as an example of how American systems fail to protect children from digital age exploitation. This international scrutiny was particularly embarrassing for Texas authorities, who found themselves having to explain to foreign media why a woman could openly exploit her children on social media while facing no meaningful consequences. The involvement of child advocacy organizations also brought new resources to bear on Ashley's case. These groups had experience navigating the complex legal and bureaucratic systems that individual reporters had struggled with, and they knew how to present evidence in ways that would be taken seriously by authorities. Professional advocates also understood how to work within existing legal frameworks while pushing for necessary reforms, providing a bridge between the grassroots documentation efforts and the official systems that needed to respond. The media attention surrounding Ashley's case also began to impact her revenue streams. Sponsors and advertisers became reluctant to be associated with content that exploited children, even indirectly. Platform algorithms began deprioritizing her content as it became associated with controversy and potential legal liability. This financial pressure represented the first real consequence Ashley had faced for her behavior. For someone whose entire motivation was monetary, the threat to her income was more effective than moral appeals or concern for her daughter's welfare. But Ashley's response to this financial pressure revealed her true priorities. Instead of changing her behavior to protect her revenue streams, she doubled down on exploitation, becoming more extreme and desperate in her attempts to maintain audience engagement and donations. She began making increasingly outrageous claims and engaging in more shocking behavior, treating her daughter's welfare as acceptable sacrifice for maintaining her income. This escalation demonstrated that Ashley would never voluntarily stop exploiting her children. External intervention was necessary. The turning point came when multiple child advocacy organizations filed formal complaints with Texas authorities, providing comprehensive documentation of Ashley's exploitation and demanding action under existing child protection laws. These complaints were different from the individual CPS reports that had been filed previously. They were professionally prepared, legally sophisticated, and impossible for authorities to dismiss or ignore. They also came with the implicit threat of legal action if authorities continued to fail in their duty to protect Ashley's daughters. The involvement of professional advocates also brought media attention from legitimate news outlets, rather than just social media coverage. This mainstream media attention created additional pressure on authorities to respond appropriately. Local news stations began investigating Ashley's case, interviewing child protection experts and legal analysts who confirmed that her behavior constituted clear violations of existing laws designed to protect children from exploitation. The legal analysis of Ashley's case also revealed that existing laws were actually adequate to address her behavior. The problem was enforcement, not legislation. This finding made it harder for authorities to claim they were powerless to act. Child protection experts noted that Ashley's behavior clearly met the legal definitions of child endangerment, exploitation, and emotional abuse. The fact that it was happening on social media didn't exempt it from existing laws designed to protect children. The documentation of Ashley's financial exploitation of her daughters also revealed potential violations of child labor laws, as she was essentially using her minor children as unpaid performers in her monetized content. Legal experts noted that if Ashley were running a traditional business that exploited children in similar ways, she would face both criminal charges and civil liability. The digital nature of her exploitation didn't change the fundamental legal principles involved. The pressure on Texas authorities intensified when national child advocacy organizations began publicly questioning why Ashley was allowed to continue exploiting her children despite overwhelming evidence of harm. These organizations had significant political influence and media connections, making their criticism of Texas authorities particularly damaging. The implication that Texas didn't take child protection seriously created political pressure for action. The involvement of national organizations also brought additional resources and expertise to bear on Ashley's case, including legal experts who specialized in digital age child exploitation and advocates who understood how to navigate complex bureaucratic systems. But perhaps the most significant development was when Ashley's own behavior began to escalate in ways that made it impossible for authorities to continue ignoring her case. As financial and social pressure mounted, Ashley became increasingly erratic and desperate. Her live streams became more chaotic, her treatment of her daughters more obviously abusive, and her decision-making more clearly impaired. The escalation in Ashley's behavior provided fresh evidence of the harm she was causing her daughters and demonstrated that the situation was deteriorating rather than improving. This made it harder for authorities to argue that intervention wasn't necessary. Ashley's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain her revenue streams also led her to make statements and engage in behaviors that were more clearly illegal, providing authorities with clearer grounds for action. The documentation efforts by concerned viewers also evolved to become more sophisticated and legally useful. Instead of just recording Ashley's behavior, advocates began organizing evidence in ways that would be most useful to authorities and legal proceedings. This included creating detailed timelines of abuse, organizing evidence by legal category, and providing expert analysis of the psychological and legal implications of Ashley's behavior. The professionalization of the documentation efforts made it much easier for authorities to understand the scope and severity of Ashley's exploitation, removing one of the barriers to effective intervention. But the most important development was that Ashley's daughters themselves began to show signs of reaching their breaking point. Their increasing distress and obvious desire to escape their situation became impossible to ignore, even for authorities who had previously been reluctant to intervene. The girls' own words, captured on Ashley's live streams, provided powerful evidence of the harm being done to them and their desire for the exploitation to stop. When children themselves are clearly expressing distress and asking for help, it becomes much harder for authorities to justify inaction, even in complex cases involving parental rights and digital platforms. The combination of professional advocacy, comprehensive documentation, media attention, and the girls' own expressed distress finally created enough pressure to force action from authorities who had previously been content to ignore Ashley's exploitation of her daughters. But the response, when it finally came, revealed both the possibilities and limitations of existing systems for protecting children in the digital age. In the final part of this series, we'll examine what happened when authorities finally acted, what it means for Ashley's daughters and other children at risk of similar exploitation, and what lessons Ashley's case teaches us about protecting children in an increasingly digital world. Because while the system's response to Ashley's case represents progress, it also reveals how much work remains to be done to protect children from parents who see them as nothing more than content to be monetized. As we reach the end of Ashley Trevino's story, the most disturbing realization isn't what she did to her daughters. It's what her case reveals about the world we're creating for all children. Ashley isn't an anomaly or an outlier. She's a preview of what happens when we build systems that reward the exploitation of children and then act surprised when parents like her emerge to fill that market demand. The Ashley Trevino case represents a watershed moment in how we understand child protection in the digital age. It's forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about the systems we've built, the values we actually prioritize, and the future we're creating for the next generation. At the time of this writing, Ashley's daughters remain in her custody. Despite overwhelming evidence of exploitation, despite hundreds of CPS reports, despite the girls themselves expressing their desire to return to their old life before internet fame, the systems designed to protect children have largely failed to intervene effectively. This failure isn't due to lack of evidence or unclear laws. It's due to a fundamental inability of existing child protection systems to address new forms of abuse enabled by digital technology. Ashley's case has exposed the gap between our 20th century child protection frameworks and 21st century realities. The legal system's response to Ashley's case has been telling in its inadequacy. While her behavior clearly violates the spirit of laws designed to protect children from exploitation, the digital nature of her abuse creates jurisdictional complications, evidentiary challenges, and enforcement difficulties that existing systems aren't equipped to handle. Prosecutors have struggled to apply traditional child endangerment and exploitation laws to cases where the abuse is happening live on social media platforms, being monetized in real time, and consumed by global audiences. The result is a legal, gray area where children can be systematically abused, while authorities claim they're powerless to intervene. This legal inadequacy has real consequences beyond Ashley's family. Every day that she continues to exploit her daughters while facing no meaningful consequences sends a message to other potential exploiters that this behavior is effectively legal and profitable. The platform response has been equally inadequate, despite clear violations of their own terms of service, despite overwhelming evidence of child exploitation. Despite sustained pressure from advocates and media, major social media platforms continue to provide Ashley with the tools and audience she needs to monetize her daughter's trauma. The platform's inability or unwillingness to effectively address Ashley's case demonstrates that self-regulation is insufficient for protecting children from digital exploitation. The financial incentives for allowing controversial content are simply too strong for platforms to voluntarily sacrifice revenue for child protection. But Ashley's case also reveals something more fundamental about the society we've created. The thousands of people who donate money to watch children being exploited, who engage with content that violates basic human dignity, who treat family dysfunction as entertainment, these aren't aberrations. They're products of a culture that has normalized the commodification of human suffering. Ashley's success isn't despite her exploitation of her daughters, it's because of it. Her audience doesn't donate money in spite of the harm she causes her children. They donate because watching that harm provides them with entertainment value. This reveals a level of societal dysfunction that extends far beyond one family's problems. The international attention Ashley's case has received has also highlighted how American approaches to child protection lag behind other developed nations. Countries with stronger privacy protections for children, more robust platform regulations, and more comprehensive child welfare systems have expressed shock at how Ashley has been allowed to continue her exploitation. This international perspective has forced uncomfortable questions about American priorities and values. How can a country that claims to prioritize family values and child welfare allow such systematic exploitation to continue? What does Ashley's case say about American society's actual commitment to protecting children? The educational impact of Ashley's case extends far beyond her immediate audience. Her normalization of exploitation, dysfunction, and abuse is teaching an entire generation that these behaviors are acceptable and even profitable. The long-term societal consequences of this education are still unfolding. Children who grow up consuming Ashley's content are learning that privacy has no value, that family relationships are transactional, that children exist to serve their parents' needs, and that love is conditional on compliance with exploitation. These lessons will shape how they approach their own relationships and, eventually, how they treat their own children. The psychological research on Ashley's case has also revealed new forms of trauma that didn't exist before social media. Her daughters are experiencing what researchers are calling digital parentification, being forced to manage their mother's online presence and emotional needs while having their own privacy and dignity systematically violated. This new form of abuse creates unique psychological challenges that existing therapeutic frameworks aren't designed to address. Ashley's daughters will need specialized treatment for trauma that most mental health professionals have never encountered before. The economic analysis of Ashley's case has revealed the true cost of allowing child exploitation to be monetized. While Ashley profits from her daughter's trauma, society bears the long-term costs of treating the psychological damage, addressing the social dysfunction, and dealing with the broader cultural impact of normalized abuse. The financial success of Ashley's exploitation model has also inspired imitators, creating a growing market for family dysfunction and child exploitation. Each new creator who follows Ashley's template represents additional children being harmed for profit. The technological aspects of Ashley's case have also revealed how digital platforms can amplify and accelerate traditional forms of abuse. the ability to monetize exploitation in real time, to reach global audiences instantly, and to create permanent records of abuse represents a fundamental shift in how child exploitation can occur. Traditional child protection approaches that rely on after-the-fact intervention are inadequate for addressing abuse that is happening live, being immediately monetized, and creating permanent digital records that will follow the victims for the rest of their lives. The data collection and algorithmic promotion aspects of Ashley's exploitation also create new forms of harm that existing legal frameworks don't address. Her daughters are being profiled, tracked, and targeted by algorithms in ways that would be illegal if done by traditional media companies. The global nature of Ashley's audience also creates enforcement challenges that existing legal systems aren't equipped to handle. How do you protect American children from exploitation when their abuse is being consumed and funded by audiences around the world? Ashley's case has also revealed the limitations of relying on public pressure and grassroots advocacy to protect children. While the documentation efforts and reporting campaigns have raised awareness and created some consequences for Ashley, they haven't been sufficient to stop the ongoing exploitation. The emotional toll on the advocates who have tried to help Ashley's daughters also demonstrates the unsustainability of relying on volunteers to address systematic child exploitation. Many of the people who have invested time and energy in trying to help have experienced secondary trauma from witnessing ongoing abuse. They feel powerless to stop. But Ashley's case has also demonstrated the power of coordinated advocacy and documentation. The comprehensive evidence compiled by concerned viewers has created an undeniable record of systematic child exploitation that will be valuable for future legal proceedings and policy development. The media attention generated by grassroots advocacy has also forced broader conversations about child protection in the digital age, platform responsibility, and the need for legal reform. These conversations are essential for creating the political will necessary for meaningful change. The international attention Ashley's case has received has also created diplomatic pressure for American authorities to address the inadequacies in their child protection systems. No country wants to be seen as a haven for child exploiters. Looking forward, Ashley's case provides a roadmap for what needs to change to protect children in the digital age. Legal frameworks need to be updated to address new forms of exploitation. Platform policies need to be strengthened and actually enforced. Child protection systems need to be modernized for digital realities. But perhaps most importantly, society needs to grapple with the fundamental question of whether we're willing to prioritize child welfare over entertainment value and profit. Ashley's success demonstrates that there's a market for child exploitation. The question is whether we're willing to eliminate that market through regulation, enforcement, and cultural change. The Ashley Trevino case will likely be studied for years as an example of how digital technology can enable new forms of child exploitation and how existing systems can fail to protect vulnerable children. But it should also serve as a wake-up call about the world we're creating and the values we're actually prioritizing. Ashley's daughters deserve better than to be case studies in systematic exploitation. They deserve privacy, dignity, safety, and the chance to grow up without having their trauma monetized for strangers' entertainment. Whether they get that chance will depend on whether society is willing to prioritize their welfare over the profits generated by their suffering. The Ashley Trevino case isn't over. It's ongoing, with new incidents of exploitation happening daily, while the world watches, and some people pay for the privilege. The question isn't whether Ashley will eventually face consequences for her behavior. It's whether those consequences will come soon enough to save her daughters from further harm. But beyond Ashley's immediate family, her case represents a test of our society's actual commitment to protecting children. If we allow Ashley to continue exploiting her daughters while facing no meaningful consequences, we're sending a clear message about what we actually value and what we're willing to tolerate. The children watching Ashley's content, the parents considering following her example, the platforms profiting from her exploitation, and the authorities responsible for protecting children are all waiting to see what happens next. The response to Ashley's case will set precedents that will impact countless other children for years to come. Ashley Trevino built an empire on her daughter's suffering, but that empire only exists because we created the systems that made it possible and profitable. Dismantling it will require more than just stopping one woman. It will require fundamentally changing how we approach child protection, platform regulation, and the monetization of human suffering in the digital age. The Ashley Trevino case is ultimately a mirror that reflects our society's true priorities and values. What we see in that reflection should disturb us enough to demand change, not just for Ashley's daughters, but for all the children who will grow up in the world we're creating. Because if we don't learn from Ashley's case and make the necessary changes, she won't be the last parent to build a fortune on her children's trauma. She'll just be the first of many, and the children who suffer will pay the price for our failure to protect them. The choice is ours. The question is what we'll choose.